I thought giving my girlfriend my apartment key meant I trusted her completely with my life and belongings. Instead, that key became her weapon to destroy everything I had worked 2 years to build and save for. Hey, this is Owen. Sophia and I had problems. But I loved her, you know? I really thought we could work through anything. I'm 24, work as a software developer, and I've been obsessed with gaming and building PCs since I was a kid. It's not just a hobby for me, it's like my sanctuary, my creative outlet, whatever you want to call it. For 2 whole years, I busted my ass saving every extra penny for this dream gaming rig. We're talking $4,000 here. I picked up side projects, worked overtime until my eyes burned, skipped going out with friends, ate ramen for months. Every single component was researched for weeks, every purchase carefully planned and saved for. The GPU alone took me 6 months to afford. When I finally built that machine, man, it was perfect. Custom water cooling, RGB lighting that I programmed myself, the works. It wasn't just a computer, it was proof that I could achieve something amazing entirely on my own. Sophia and I started dating right around when I was halfway through saving for the build. She's 23, works in daycare, and honestly, she's gorgeous. Confident, outgoing, always looked like she stepped out of a magazine. I was drawn to that energy, that social butterfly thing she had going. For the first few months, everything was incredible. She seemed to get my passion for technology, even asked questions about my build plans. I thought I'd found someone who understood me, but things started shifting around month 6. She'd make little comments about my priorities. Why was I spending so much money on computer parts instead of taking her somewhere nice for dinner? Couldn't I skip one gaming session to plan a romantic evening? At first, I thought she was just trying to spend more quality time together, which I got. I started making compromises, cutting back on gaming hours, taking her to nicer restaurants, even when it meant delaying my PC build by another month. The thing is, it was never enough. And honestly, how do you even quantify enough when it comes to someone else's expectations? She'd see her friends posting about their boyfriends buying them designer bags or surprise weekend getaways, and suddenly our movie nights at home weren't cutting it anymore. She wanted expensive dates, wanted me to spoil her with gifts, wanted this whole lifestyle that, frankly, I couldn't afford if I was also pursuing my own goals. I gave her my apartment key after 8 months of dating. Big mistake, obviously, but at the time it felt like the natural next step. She was staying over most nights anyway, and I trusted her completely. I mean, who doesn't trust the person they're falling in love with? The arguments got worse after I finally completed my build. She'd watch me setting it up, and I could see this resentment building in her eyes. One night she straight up said, "You spent $4,000 on that thing, Owen. $4,000. Do you realize what we could have done with that money?" I tried explaining that it wasn't our money, it was mine, that I'd worked specifically to afford this, that it represented 2 years of sacrifice. But she just rolled her eyes and said I was being selfish. The gaming time became a constant source of tension. I get home from work, exhausted from coding all day, and all I wanted was to decompress for an hour or two playing games. But Sophia saw it as me choosing the computer over her. She'd stand behind my chair, making pointed comments about how I was ignoring her, how other boyfriends planned surprise dates instead of staring at screens all night. I started feeling guilty every time I touched my mouse. Things came to a head about 2 weeks before everything went to hell. We had this massive fight where she accused me of caring more about my stupid gaming addiction than our relationship. I tried to explain that gaming wasn't an addiction. It was my way of unwinding, my creative outlet, my community. I had friends online I'd been playing with for years, but she wasn't hearing any of it. She wanted me to choose between her and my hobbies, which seemed insane to me. Healthy relationships don't work that way, right? One night, she stormed out after another argument about priorities. Her parting shot was, "You care more about that stupid computer than you do about me. Maybe someday you'll realize what you're throwing away." I thought she meant our relationship. Turns out, she meant something entirely different. I should have seen the warning signs. The way she talked about my gaming setup, like it was some personal insult to her. The increasing demands for expensive gestures. The complete inability to understand that I could love her and still have my own interests. But I was so caught up in trying to make her happy, trying to prove I could be the boyfriend she wanted, that I missed how toxic things had gotten.
Hey there, I'm Sophia. I know how this is going to sound, but hear me out. I wasn't trying to be vindictive or anything. I genuinely thought I was helping Owen see what really mattered. Like, when you love someone, don't you want them to prioritize you? Don't you want to feel like you're worth investing in? My Instagram feed was full of girls getting surprised with weekend trips to Napa, designer jewelry, thoughtful gestures that show their boyfriends were really thinking about them. Meanwhile, Owen was over here spending $4,000 on computer parts while suggesting we split appetizers at Applebee's for date night. Look, I wasn't some gold digger expecting him to bankroll my entire life. I have my own job, my own money. But there's something to be said for effort, right? For showing someone they matter enough to splurge on occasionally. Owen would research graphics cards for weeks, comparing prices down to the penny, reading endless reviews. But when it came to planning something special for us, he'd suggest Netflix and takeout. Again, the worst part was watching him get so excited about that stupid computer while treating our relationship like an afterthought. He'd stay up until 2 a.m. researching motherboards, but he couldn't be bothered to remember that I mentioned wanting to try that new rooftop restaurant downtown. He'd spend hours in online forums talking about cooling systems with complete strangers, but when I tried to discuss our future together, he'd get this glazed look like I was interrupting something important. And honestly, why should I have to compete with a computer for my boyfriend's attention? I mean, I'm sitting right there in his apartment, looking amazing, and he's choosing to stare at a screen instead of appreciating what's in front of him. Sometimes I'd deliberately walk past his setup in something cute, and he wouldn't even glance up. Like, hello, your gorgeous girlfriend is right here, but sure, keep talking to those random internet weirdos about graphic settings or whatever. I tried explaining to him that real relationships require effort and attention, that maybe he could cut back on the gaming so we could focus on us. But he'd get all defensive, acting like I was some controlling psycho for wanting my boyfriend to actually pay attention to me. He kept saying he needed the gaming time to relax, like his job was so much more stressful than mine. The breaking point came during girls' night at my friend Jessica's place. She was showing off this gorgeous Chanel bag her boyfriend surprised her with for their 6-month anniversary. My friend Ashley's boyfriend had just booked them a long weekend in Seattle because she mentioned wanting to see the city. Here I was, dating Owen for a year, and what did I have to show for it? Stories about graphics cards, and complaints about how he never had money for anything fun because he was saving for computer upgrades. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting Chanel bags. But something, anything, that showed he valued our relationship enough to invest in it the way he invested in his hobbies. When Jessica asked what Owen had gotten me for our anniversary, I had to admit it was a homemade dinner and a movie at his place. Same thing we did every other week. The pity looks from my friends were humiliating. That night, walking back to my car, I made a decision. Owen clearly didn't understand what being in a relationship meant, so I was going to teach him. He'd wasted $4,000 on himself while I got nothing. $4,000 that could have been spent on us, on making me happy, on showing the world that he actually valued his girlfriend. I had his apartment key, and I knew his work schedule perfectly. The next day, while he was probably coding away and ignoring my texts like usual, I went over to his place. Looking at that ridiculous setup with all its flashing lights and expensive components just made me angrier. This thing had been my competition for months. This machine got more attention, more investment, more care than I ever did. I took photos and posted everything online immediately. Listed the whole setup for like $1,500 because I wanted it gone that day, no questions asked. I wasn't about to spend weeks dealing with tech nerds asking about specifications and trying to negotiate. Within 2 hours, some college kids showed up with cash and started hauling everything away. $1,500 for Owen's precious $4,000 build. The look on that kid's face when he saw what he was getting for that price was priceless. Money that was finally going to be spent on something worthwhile instead of Owen's selfish hobby. The shopping spree was incredible. Finally, I could buy myself the things I deserved. That Michael Kors bag I'd been wanting forever, designer shoes that cost more than Owen usually spent on our dates, and the most perfect dress for my work event. Walking out of those stores with expensive bags felt like justice. For once, Owen's money was being spent on something that actually mattered. I knew he'd throw a tantrum when he got home, but so what? Sometimes people need dramatic wake-up calls to change their behavior. I figured he'd be mad for a few days, then realize I was right. Maybe he'd even appreciate that I'd forced him to focus on what was really important instead of wasting his life playing games with strangers. The computer was just stuff, but our relationship was supposed to be forever. Besides, it wasn't like I'd stolen from him or anything. We were practically living together. I had a key, and couples share things. If he really loved me, he would have been happy to see me finally get something nice instead of watching all his money disappear into computer parts that served no real purpose. I mean, it's not like the computer was gone forever. He could always build another one, but this time maybe he'd involve me in the process. Maybe we could find a middle ground where he still got to pursue his hobbies, but not at the expense of our relationship. I was trying to save what we had, not destroy it. Looking back now, I realize how naive that sounds. But at the time, I honestly believed I was doing the right thing. I thought I was fighting for us, showing him what really mattered. How was I supposed to know he'd react so dramatically? How was I supposed to know he'd choose a computer over the woman he claimed to love?
I still remember that moment like it's burned into my brain. Walking into my apartment after a particularly brutal day debugging code, looking forward to unwinding with some gaming and seeing absolutely nothing where my setup used to be. Not just powered down or moved. Gone. Completely gone. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. The desk was there, my monitor arms were still mounted to it, but everything else had vanished. The custom tower I'd spent months building, the monitors, the mechanical keyboard I'd saved for specifically the high-end mouse, even the damn cables. For maybe 30 seconds, I stood there thinking maybe I was having some kind of breakdown, like stress had finally made me lose my mind. Then reality hit. Someone had been in my apartment. Someone had stolen everything. My heart started pounding as I checked the front door, the windows, looking for signs of break-in. Nothing. No damaged locks, no broken glass. Whoever did this had a key. I called Sophia immediately, my hands actually shaking as I dialed. Maybe she'd seen something. Maybe she knew what happened. When she picked up, I could hear music and voices in the background like she was out somewhere having a good time. I told her my gaming setup was gone, that someone had broken into my apartment and stolen everything. There was this pause, maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like forever. Then she told me, in the most casual tone imaginable, that she'd sold it. She'd sold my computer. Just like that. 3 words that made my entire world stop spinning. I couldn't speak. Literally could not form words. This woman I'd been dating for a year, who I'd trusted with my apartment key, who I'd thought I was falling in love with, had just casually admitted to stealing and selling my most prized possessions. She went on to explain that we needed to have a serious conversation about priorities, that I clearly wasn't getting the message, so she'd help me see what really matters. When I finally managed to ask how much she'd sold it for, she told me $1,500. She started going on about how she'd bought herself some nice things, how I should be happy that the money was finally being used for something meaningful instead of my selfish hobbies. She actually expected me to thank her. Can you believe that? She expected me to be grateful that she'd stolen my property and destroyed something I'd worked years to achieve. That's when I hung up on her and immediately called my landlord. Explained the situation that my girlfriend had stolen from me and I needed to change the locks for security. He was cool about it. Said as long as I gave him copies of the new keys within 24 hours, I could go ahead. Then I called a locksmith. I wasn't going to spend another second of my life wondering if she might come back to steal whatever else she decided I didn't deserve to have. The locksmith showed up within an hour, and I had him change the lock on my apartment. Next step was figuring out my legal options. I filed a police report first thing the next morning, but the officer basically told me what I already suspected. Since we were in a relationship and she had access to my apartment, it was considered a civil matter unless I could prove criminal intent. They suggested small claims court, which was exactly where I'd already decided this was heading. The small claims paperwork was surprisingly straightforward. I had to list the value of what was stolen, provide evidence of ownership, and explain the circumstances. For $1,000 in computer equipment, 2 years of receipts and bank statements, photos of my build in progress, even screenshots of my posts in PC building forums documenting the whole process. This wasn't going to be some he said, she said situation where my word was worthless. The hardest part was tracking down who'd bought my setup. I scoured Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist until I found the listing she'd posted. $1,500 for everything, sold same day. I messaged the buyer explaining what had happened, and surprisingly, he was sympathetic. College kid who couldn't believe someone would sell their boyfriend's gaming rig without permission. He even sent me screenshots of their conversation where Sophia claimed it was hers to sell. That evidence was golden. Not only did it prove the sale price, but it showed that she'd actively lied about ownership to make the sale happen. She hadn't just stolen my property, she'd committed fraud to cover it up. I tried calling Sophia one more time before filing the court papers, giving her a chance to make this right without involving lawyers and judges. She answered like nothing had happened, asking if I was ready to apologize for overreacting and move forward with our relationship. When I told her she had 24 hours to return my $4,000 or I'd see her in court, she laughed. Actually laughed. Said I was being dramatic over some computer parts and that she'd done me a favor by forcing me to grow up. That laugh was the last straw. I filed the small claims suit that afternoon, requesting the full $4,000 value plus court costs. The paperwork got served to her at work 3 days later. Suddenly, her tune changed real quick when she realized I wasn't bluffing about taking this seriously.
Honestly, when Owen hung up on me after I explained what I'd done, I figured he just needed a few hours to cool down. Guys always get dramatic about their toys before they realize you're actually looking out for them, right? I went back to my girls' night feeling pretty satisfied with myself. Finally, I'd gotten through to him about what really mattered. The locksmith thing was petty, I'll give him that. Showing up at his apartment the next day with coffee and pastries, planning to have a calm conversation about moving forward, only to find my key didn't work anymore. That stung a little, but I got it. He was hurt and acting out. I'd done the same thing after fights with previous boyfriends. I left him alone for a few days, letting him process everything. Gave him space to miss me, to realize how good he had it with me in his life. I posted some cute pictures on Instagram wearing my new dress, looking absolutely incredible, figuring he'd see them and remember what he was risking by being stubborn about some computer equipment. But then the calls started going straight to voicemail. My texts weren't getting responses. When I checked his social media, I realized he'd blocked me everywhere. That's when I started getting worried that maybe he was taking this whole thing too seriously. I tried calling from my friend's phone, and he actually picked up. I tried explaining that he was being ridiculous, that couples work through problems together instead of threatening lawsuits, that I'd been trying to help our relationship, not hurt him. But he just kept going on about theft and property rights like I was some stranger who'd robbed him instead of his girlfriend who was looking out for his best interests. When he hung up again, I figured he was bluffing. People say they're going to sue all the time when they're angry, but how many actually follow through? Especially over relationship drama. I mean, what judge would take seriously a case about a boyfriend and girlfriend fighting over computer parts? 3 days later, I got served at work. Right in front of my coworkers, some guy in a cheap suit handed me legal papers and asked me to confirm my identity before walking away. The embarrassment was brutal, but the content was worse. Owen was actually suing me for $4,000 plus court costs. Not $1,500, $4,000. My hands were shaking as I read through the paperwork in my car during lunch break. He documented everything. Every receipt, every component, every penny he'd spent building that stupid computer. Photos of the build process, screenshots of online forums where he'd posted about it, even bank statements showing the exact dates he'd purchased each part. It was obsessive and frankly a little scary how much evidence he'd gathered. I called my dad, hoping he'd help me figure out how to handle this mess. He's a contractor, deals with legal stuff sometimes, so I thought he'd understand that Owen was being unreasonable. Instead, He asked me if I'd really sold my boyfriend's computer without permission, and when I explained the situation, he got quiet for a long time. Finally, he said I'd screwed up big time and needed to find a way to pay Owen back immediately. That it didn't matter why I'd done it or what my intentions were, I'd taken something that wasn't mine and sold it. When I started crying and explaining that I didn't have $4,000, he told me that wasn't Owen's problem, it was mine. Even my mom, who usually takes my side in everything, seemed disappointed when I told her what was happening. She kept asking why I hadn't just talked to Owen about my concerns instead of taking matters into my own hands. Why I thought selling his belongings was an appropriate way to handle relationship problems. Questions I didn't really have good answers for. The court date was set for 6 weeks out, which gave me time to panic properly. I looked into lawyers, but they all wanted retainers I couldn't afford for what they said was pretty much an open and shut case. One guy actually told me I should consider myself lucky Owen was only going after the money and not pressing criminal charges. I tried reaching out to Owen one more time through mutual friends, hoping we could settle this without going to court. But apparently, he'd already told everyone what I'd done, and nobody was very sympathetic to my side of the story. Our friend Mike actually told me I was lucky Owen wasn't asking for the full replacement cost of building an identical system, which would have been even more expensive. Walking into that courtroom was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. Owen showed up looking professional and prepared, with a folder full of evidence and receipts. I had nothing but excuses and explanations that sounded weaker every time I tried to voice them. The judge listened to Owen's presentation for maybe 5 minutes. All those receipts, the photos, the timeline of his purchases, the screenshots from the buyer proving the sale price. Then she asked me to explain my side, and honestly, what was I supposed to say? That I'd thought teaching my boyfriend a lesson about priorities was worth stealing his property? I tried explaining that we were in a relationship, that I'd felt neglected, that I'd been trying to help him see what really mattered. But every word that came out of my mouth just made me sound more entitled and selfish. How do you explain to a judge that you thought your boyfriend's hobby was stupid, so you decided to sell it without permission? The ruling took about 30 seconds. $4,000 plus court costs to be paid within 90 days. The judge actually said that being in a relationship doesn't give someone the right to take and sell another person's property, regardless of their motivations. Like I was a child who needed basic concepts explained to me. Walking out of that courtroom, knowing I owed Owen over $4,000 I didn't have, was rock bottom. I had to sell everything I bought with his money, plus some of my own stuff, plus borrow from my parents to come up with the cash. My dad made it clear this was a one-time bailout and that I'd better learn something from the whole mess. The worst part came months later when I saw Owen's Instagram post about rebuilding his gaming setup. New components, better than before, set up in his apartment. He looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way I don't think I'd ever seen when we were together. The comments were full of friends congratulating him on his fresh start. That's when it really hit me what I'd lost. Not just the money, not just the embarrassment, but someone who'd actually cared about me before I proved I didn't deserve it. Someone who trusted me with his home and his heart before I decided his happiness was worth less than my shopping spree. Was it really worth it, destroying everything we had over some computer parts? Looking back now, I honestly don't know what I was thinking.